The waitress leaned in close, her voice barely louder than the hum of the diner. "Don't drink that," she whispered. "Run. Now." The man at the counter didn't look like someone who panicked easily. Leather vest, heavy boots, a Hell's Angel patch worn like armor. Something she'd seen moments earlier made her hands shake, and the warning cost her more courage than she had ever spent. Before I go on, if stories of unexpected courage matter to you, please like this video, share it with someone who believes kindness still exists, and consider subscribing. It helps keep stories alive. The glass sat untouched. His fingers moved toward it anyway, and he reached for the rim. Door behind them slammed shut. The whisper hung between them, thin and fragile, as if a single breath could shatter it. "Don't drink that." The words echoed in the man's mind while the glass sat motionless in front of him, beads of condensation slowly sliding down its side. For a moment, everything seemed to pause. The low murmur of distant conversation, the steady ticking of the clock above the counter, even the faint clink of dishes in the back. Nothing had happened yet, but something was terribly wrong. Danger didn't announce itself loudly here. It waited quietly, pretending to be ordinary. The man studied the glass without touching it. He didn't tense. He didn't flinch. Years on the road had taught him that panic was a luxury, and rushing decisions often carried consequences. To anyone else, he probably looked intimidating just sitting there. The leather vest across his back bore a patch that made strangers uneasy. Heavy boots rested flat on the diner's worn tile floor. His presence alone changed the temperature of the room, even though he hadn't said a word. People saw the symbol and filled in the rest of the story themselves. But his eyes were calm, observant. He noticed details most people missed. The way the waitress's hand trembled as she reached for a napkin. The way her gaze flicked toward the far end of the counter and then quickly away. He saw fear, but not the kind born from him. This fear was older, sharper, and familiar. The waitress straightened slowly, forcing her shoulders back as if posture alone could keep her steady. She was ordinary by every measure. Mid-30s, tired eyes, hair pulled back for convenience rather than style. She had worked this diner long enough to recognize the rhythms of people passing through. Truckers, travelers, locals who came in every morning at the same time. She knew who lingered and who didn't. She knew when silence felt normal and when it felt wrong. This silence felt wrong. The diner itself was quiet in that way only remote places ever are. It sat just off a long stretch of highway, the kind drivers used when they wanted to avoid traffic or didn't want to be noticed. The booths were old, the vinyl cracked from decades of use. The air smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. It was supposed to be a safe space, a pause between destinations. A place where nobody asked questions and everyone was just passing through. That illusion was breaking. The audience would be forgiven for thinking this wouldn't end well. A Hell's Angel, a frightened waitress, a whispered warning. Every instinct says this is where things spiral out of control, that something ugly is about to happen, that the man at the counter is the threat. Yet he didn't act like one. He lifted his eyes, meeting hers just long enough to acknowledge what she'd done. No nod, no words, just understanding. He didn't reach for the glass. Not yet. Instead, he listened to the room, to the pauses between sounds, to the instinct that had kept him alive more times than he could count. She swallowed hard and busied herself wiping the counter, though it was already clean. Her mind replayed the moment that led to the whisper. She had seen this before once. Long ago, back when she'd still believed it was safer to mind her own business. That memory carried a weight she never quite put down, and when she recognized the signs again, she knew pretending not to notice would haunt her. The glass wasn't meant for him. That thought pulsed through her chest, steady and insistent. She didn't know why. She didn't know who. She only knew enough to be afraid. The man finally moved, but not the way anyone expected. His hand stopped just short of the glass, hovering there as if he were measuring something invisible. He glanced around the diner, taking in faces that avoided his eyes, shoulders that stiffened when he turned his head. He wasn't angry. He wasn't suspicious of her. If anything, he seemed thoughtful. And then, without warning, the story shifts. Earlier that day, The diner had felt harmless. Sunlight poured through the windows, catching dust motes in the air. The waitress had started her shift the same way she always did, pouring coffee, exchanging small talk, counting hours until closing. The man had arrived quietly, alone, choosing the counter instead of booth. Nothing about him screamed trouble. He ordered simply, polite, paid attention. That rewind matters, because it reminds us how easily danger slips into ordinary moments. How quickly a normal day can tilt into something else entirely. Now, back in the present, the pause stretched thin. Whatever happened next would depend on choices made in seconds, but rooted in decisions formed over a lifetime. The whisper had already changed the course of the afternoon. Neither of them knew how far those words would travel, only that there was no taking them back. The warning kept circling back, quiet but persistent. Don't drink that. The waitress moved through her routine, but nothing felt routine anymore. Her eyes kept returning to the counter, to the untouched glass, to the man who hadn't reacted the way fear usually made people react. That alone unsettled her. Most people laughed things off or demanded explanations. He did neither. He simply noticed. What had first caught her attention was small. Almost nothing. A tone that didn't match the words being spoken. Someone near the end of the counter had asked an ordinary question, yet the air shifted when it was asked. It wasn't rude. It wasn't loud. But it carried an edge that didn't belong in a place like this. She felt it in her shoulders before she understood it in her mind. Then there was the body language. The way one person lingered longer than necessary. The way their gaze moved, not casually, but deliberately, tracking reflections in the chrome napkin holder. The way they watched the man in the vest without ever turning fully toward him. It reminded her of something she wished she'd forgotten, and that memory tightened her chest. She had told herself she was imagining things. Long shifts did that to you. Fatigue played tricks. But then came a moment she couldn't ignore. A brief exchange she overheard while refilling a cup. A sentence cut short when she stepped closer. A look passed between two people who thought no one was paying attention. That was when her instincts took over, the same one she'd ignored once before and regretted ever since. The man at the counter sensed the change before she spoke again. He'd learned to read rooms the way some people read books. The slight stiffness in her movements. The way her voice dipped when she asked if he wanted a refill. He didn't answer right away. He didn't want to draw attention. His code had always been simple. Respect the space you're in, respect the people around you, and never be the reason a place feels unsafe. That code had guided him long before the vest ever did. People assumed they knew him the moment they saw the patch. They imagined noise, aggression, recklessness. But the truth was quieter. Loyalty mattered more to him than ego. Restraint mattered more than intimidation. And kindness, when offered without expectation, mattered more than reputation. He didn't announce those values. He lived them, especially when no one was watching. The third presence in the diner didn't announce itself either. There was nothing obvious to point at, no clear threat to name. Just someone who didn't fit quite right. Someone whose interest in the room felt selective rather than casual. They kept their voice low, posture relaxed, but their attention never drifted far from the counter. If you weren't looking for it, you'd miss it entirely. The waitress noticed, and so did he. Fear pulled at her from one side, responsibility from the other. She needed this job. She needed normalcy. Drawing attention could mean trouble she wasn't equipped to handle. But doing nothing meant living with the knowledge that she'd seen the signs and turned away again. Her heart raced every time she passed the glass, every time she remembered the once she hadn't spoken up and how long it took to forgive herself for that silence. She caught his eye again just briefly. This time he gave the smallest nod. Not encouragement, not a promise, just acknowledgement. Whatever she'd risked by warning him, he understood. The question lingered unspoken between them. Why him? Why today? The diner saw plenty of people pass through, people with money, people with nothing, people who blended imperfectly. Yet whatever was unfolding had centered on him. And another question followed close behind. Who benefits if he drinks from that glass and nothing more is said? He leaned back slightly, giving the impression of ease while his mind worked quickly. He replayed the warning, measured the room, weighed his options. He could leave, walk away, avoid whatever storm might be gathering. That would be the simplest path, and often the smartest. But simplicity wasn't the same as right, and his instincts told him walking out wouldn't make the danger disappear. It would only redirect it. The danger wasn't random. That realization settled quietly but firmly. This wasn't bad luck or coincidence. Someone had counted on assumptions, on fear, on the idea that a man like him wouldn't be warned or wouldn't listen if he was. The pace of his thoughts shifted. Observation gave way to intention. As he waited, memories surfaced, uninvited but grounding. Long stretches of road where he'd stopped to help strangers without names. Nights when a small act made a difference no one ever wrote about. He remembered the look on a kid's face when a flat tire turned into a lesson instead of a disaster. The gratitude of an older woman whose groceries he'd carried without a word. Those moments never made headlines. They didn't need to. They reminded him who he was beneath the leather and patches. Back in the diner, the quiet stretched thin. The third presence shifted in their seat. The waitress felt it too, the tightening of something unseen. Her breath came shallow now, and she fought the urge to retreat to the kitchen and stay there. Instead, she wiped the same spot on the counter again, grounding herself in the motion. The loop closed again in his mind. Don't drink that. It wasn't a suggestion. It was urgency wrapped in fear. He trusted that fear more than he trusted appearances. He made his move calmly, standing just enough to adjust his posture, as if easing his stiff back. It was nothing anyone would react to, and that was the point. His voice, when he spoke, was low and even, directed at no one in particular. A simple comment about the weather, about the road ahead. Ordinary words meant to test the room. The reaction was subtle, but it was there. A pause. A glance exchanged. Confirmation. The waitress caught it and felt a strange mix of dread and relief. She hadn't imagined it. She hadn't overreacted. Something was wrong, and now was out in the open, even if only to a few people who understood what they were seeing. Her fear didn't disappear, but it changed shape. It became steadier, more purposeful. She had done what she could. What happened next wasn't in her control, but she knew she wouldn't regret speaking up this time. The man shifted his weight, decision made. Whatever came next would require speed and clarity, not force. He wasn't here to prove anything. He was here to make sure the day didn't end worse than it needed to. Around them, the diner carried on its quiet hum, unaware of how close it was to becoming something else entirely. The untouched glass still sat between them, a silent reminder that small moments could carry enormous weight. And as the tension thickened, one truth became clear. The warning had set something in motion that could no longer be stopped, and everyone involved was about to learn just how much a whisper could change. The air in the diner had shifted. Every whispered doubt, every glance, every silent measurement of space had led to this moment. The man at the counter, patch heavy on his chest, hand steady on the edge of the counter, did something no one expected. Not a punch, not a chase. He simply rose, moved with deliberate calm, and walked toward the source of unease. Each step measured, controlled, speaking of confidence that wasn't aggression. The room seemed to hold its breath. The waitress watched, heart hammering, unsure whether to flee or trust. She did understand why she did trust him, only that the same instinct that had driven her to whisper the warning now told her to watch, quietly, and let him act. He approached the person lingering near the end of the counter. The subtle presence that had unnerved her, the silent observer whose intent had been masked in casual gestures. Instead of confrontation, the biker reached for his phone and dialed. His voice, calm and firm, explained the situation to authorities. A potential threat, nothing yet violent, but enough to warrant attention. There was no bravado, no vigilante justice. Just clarity, just measured action. The diner felt the tension ease infinitesimally at first. Those who had noticed the shifts glanced at each other, unspoken understanding passing between them. The third person, realizing their window of advantage had closed, stepped back. Every movement was observed, but no harm came to anyone. Authorities arrived swiftly, their presence professional and controlled. Questions were asked, identities confirmed, and the nature of the threat, suspicious activity surrounding the unattended glass, was explained. The truth was simple, yet it carried weight. Someone had intended harm, but the combination of the waitress's courage and the biker's calm intervention had prevented it. The waitress finally exhaled, a sound almost lost in the hum of the returning normalcy. Relief washed over her, tempered by lingering adrenaline. She realized she hadn't imagined the danger, hadn't overreacted. She had spoken, and it had mattered. The biker returned to his seat, untouched by praise, untouched by recognition. His silence was dignity, a quiet statement that sometimes heroism required no announcement, only action. The patrons who had watched, previously poised between fear and curiosity, began to settle back into their meals, conversations cautiously resuming. And yet the diner had changed. The air carried a subtle weight of what had passed. Even in its ordinary light, the space seemed more aware, more alive. People glanced at the counter now, at the glass that had remained untouched, and at the man who had quietly prevented catastrophe. Judgment, assumptions, and appearances had all been challenged. The biker, scars hidden beneath leather, reputation looming large, was not what anyone expected. The waitress, ordinary in every way but for her courage, had proven that small choices could ripple outward in extraordinary ways. The untouched glass remained on the counter, simple and silent, a reminder that vigilance, ethics, and restraint could save more than brute force ever could. It caught the light as the sun shifted, gleaming in its quiet testimony. And as the room settled, the audience finally understood. Appearances deceive, courage is quiet, and sometimes the smallest act, speaking up, observing carefully, choosing calm over chaos, makes the greatest difference. In that moment, everyone in the diner, everyone who had watched this story unfold, learned a profound truth. Sometimes judgment is wrong. Heroes do not always roar, and danger can be diffused without a single violent act. The moral weight of what had passed lingered in the air, a lesson etched into memory. The waitress smiled faintly. The biker's eyes caught hers briefly, and no words were exchanged. Understanding passed between them. Life would continue outside the diner, but the lesson remained, anchored forever by the quiet, steadfast presence of an untouched glass.